Hello, you're welcome to my channel. My name is Tomisi Ayeni, and I'm going to be teaching you how to make this front and back dress pattern. So I'll be using a guide chart I came across in this fashion book, and it has the shoulder guide, the bust guide, and the neck guide. So these guides are actually in centimeters, so I'm just going to trace out my bust circumference in centimeters. It's 87 or so. I'm going to use 88, so I'm going to come back to that later, but for now this is my measurements. And before I start anything, I always create a block. So this right here is the block I'm going to be using, and for the width of my block, it's my bust circumference divided by 4. That's 34 divided by 4. That's I have 8.5 inches. 8.5 inches by the length of the dress pattern. So my dress pattern is 38 inches, so the length here is 38 inches. So having this block first, then I can start my pattern. So I'm confirming the length here, 38 inches by 8.5 inches. 8.5 inches is the bust divided by 4. So now I'm coming back to the bust guideline, shoulder guideline, and the neck guideline. Making use of 34 inches for the bust, I've just marked out what it is in centimeters. It's 87, but 87 I just had to round it up to 88 because there's no 87 on the chart. For 88 centimeters, bust guideline is 21.5, shoulder guideline is 6.0, neck guideline is 6.5. Please take note that these guidelines are in centimeters. So I'm going to draw out the shoulder guideline first, and I'm going to start from the top here. I'm going to measure 6.0 centimeter. You can see my ruler is in centimeter, so I'm going to draw out the straight line there. That's for the shoulder guideline. And the next thing I'm going to draw out is the bust guideline. The bust guideline is 21.5 centimeters. So this bust guideline is also like the armhole depth. Yeah, it's actually the armhole depth. So then I'm going to draw out neck guideline. So this is to know where the neck should start from. That's 6.5 centimeter, which is a standard neck hole in case of like shirt collar or turtleneck. Now I will be measuring the front chest. This right here is a measurement guide, and you can see where I have the red mark there. It's the front chest. And if you look at number 8, you see how to take your front chest measurement. It's quite different from how you take your back width measurements, which I marked in blue. So my front chest measurement is 12.5, and divided by 2 it's going to be 6.25. Starting from the center front right here, I'm just going to measure 6.25 inches. These ones are in centimeters, so please do not make the mistake. I'm measuring 6.5 inches. You can see that I have changed my ruler to the inches. So 6.5 inches, I'm going to measure it from the top of the pattern to the bust guideline. So I'm just going to draw out a straight line to meet each other there. So this is also like the armhole depth for my size, which is 34 inches. I'll just go ahead and label it. This is the bust guideline, and this is the shoulder guideline. Yeah, and this is the neck guideline, and this is like the armhole depth I told you before. So this is the armhole depth. So the next thing to do right now is to measure 2.5 centimeters up from the shoulder guideline on the armhole line. So 2.5 centimeters from this point upward is going to be our guide to where our shoulder line will drop. So just give it like a kind of dot just so that we'll know where our shoulder will drop, what will land. So it doesn't go too down and it doesn't go too up. So shoulder line is 5 inches. So I'll measure 5 inches, which is the shoulder measurement, and stop on this guideline I just made here, the 2.5 I marked. So if I'm coming from 4 or 6, I make sure I stop on that line. From this point where the shoulder line meets the armhole line to the bust guideline point, I'm going to measure what I have there and I'll divide it by 2. So I have 7 there, divided by 2 is 3.5. Then I'm just going to slant it to meet my shoulder line. Yeah, so I'm going to slant it to this point. And the next thing to do now, I'm going to measure 2.5 centimeters from this point. You see the way I place my ruler, I'm going to slant it upward like this, and just to make sure that my armhole does not go too deep. So I'm going to place my armhole curve and I'm going to just trace it out to meet with the midpoint there and the end of my pattern, the end of my block. So this is the armhole and this is for the front. I'm making the front pattern first. The next thing to do is for the neck hole, I'm just going to come down 1.5 centimeter from the shoulder line. I'm just going to mark it out for the neck hole. So this is a standard neck hole. From the shoulder guard line, I came down 1.5 centimeters for the front. Now I'm going to go ahead and continue my pattern, which is I'm going to measure the shoulder to waist. So my shoulder to waist is 16 and I'm going to mark 16 out and I'm going to draw the line. Now I'm just marking out 16 and I'm going to draw the guideline, my waist guideline. And the next thing to do is to draw out the hip guideline. My waist to hip or seat, some people refer to it as the seat measurement, while some refer to it as the hip measurement. It's 8 inches. So I'm going to measure 8 inches from my waist. So this is my waist. I'm going to measure 8 inches downward, 8 inches downward, and draw the guideline. So this is my waist guideline. I'm just going to go ahead and draw my hip guideline. Now I'm going to measure my waist circumference divided by 4 and mark out the measurements on my guideline. So my waist is 28 inches, divided by 4 is 7 inches, and my hip is 39, divided by 4 is 9.75. I'll go ahead and mark these respectively. On my waist I have 7 inches. I'm gonna slant it from the bust guide. I know the bust guide there is already divided by 4 because my block is divided by 4, so, which is my bust circumference divided by 4. So on the hip line here, I'm going to extend the line to the point at which my hip is. That's 9.75. I'm going to make use of my hip curve to join the curve from the waist to the hip. After this, we are going to measure the hem line. The hem line is going to be -1 of what we have here to give it that fitting, depending on the style of dress you want. If you don't want it to be fitted, you can design your hem line to be as free as possible. I want it to be like a fitted dress, so -1 is 8.75. So I measured 8.75 down there and I'm just going to join the hem line. So this is my front pattern. I'll just label this down part, the hem line, and I'll label my pattern also as the front pattern so that I don't have any mix up when I make the back pattern also. Now I'm going to draw out the underarm dart, and for that I'm going to need my dart measurement. I'll be needing the shoulder to bust point and the nipple to nipple point. So these are the measurements I'll be needing. Shoulder to bust point is 10 inches, while the nipple to nipple point is 7 inches. On my pattern, from the shoulder line, I'm going to measure 10 inches to my bust point. So that's my shoulder to bust point. And on that bust point, I'm going to measure 7 inches divided by 2. That's 3.5. My nipple to nipple point divided by 2, because my front pattern is divided by 2. So I'm just drawing the nipple to nipple line, and this point right here is the nipple point. The bust guideline, I'm going to measure 9 centimeters down from the seam allowance and slant it to my bust point. Then I'm going to measure out what I want to take in as that. I'm taking it 1 inch, so I'm just going to divide 1 inch equally, and I'm going to come down about 2 centimeters so that my dart does not get to the bust point. So I came down 2 centimeters before I drew my dart allowance. So this is my dart, and this is what I'm going to be taking on a dress. If I'm making a dress from this pattern, this point will be the point where I draw while taking my dart. So basically the front pattern is finished. I just have to extend the dart line so that when I take the dart, I still have to maintain a straight line. Now that I'm done with the front pattern, I'll go ahead and add my seam allowance. So I'm just gonna let you watch how I add the seam allowance. Please take note how I marked the major points before I added my allowance. I marked every major point so that I don't have one part looking different than the other. So I marked out all major points, then I just added my allowance. So now I'm done with the front pattern, and we can go ahead and just draft the back pattern. It's quite similar, but just a little bit of difference. This is a measurement for both the front and back pattern, and you can see some difference. The back width is 30.5, front chest is 12.5, gown length for the back is 37, while for the front is 38, and shoulder to waist is 15, while for the front is 16. So you can see this point here, when I take in the underarm dart there, it's going to fall back to 15. So this is the front and the back pattern, and let's just get right into the pattern. And now this is the block again. However, before I started the block, I added zip allowance of 1 inch before I started the block. So from this point here is 8.5 inches, which is my bust divided by 4, and the length is 37 inches, unlike the front pattern which is 38 inches. And the difference is because of the shoulder to waist of the front is 16, while the shoulder to waist of the front is 15, which is going to be corrected with the 1 inch underarm dart that we added earlier on. So I'm going to draw out the same guideline I drafted out on the front pattern. So this is the shoulder guideline. I'm going to measure the bust guideline and the neck guideline also, but there's gonna be a difference in this upper part because for the front I use the front chest, while for the back we are going to be using the back width. For the front chest was 12.5, for the back width here I have 13.5, which divided by 2 give me 6.75. Just the way I measure the front chest, from the center back I'm going to measure 6.75, and I'm going to draw the straight line to meet each other there. So this right here is going to be the armhole line. So don't forget, it is our boys guideline, and this right here is our armhole line. So from this point here I'm going to measure 2.5 centimeter upward, the same way I did it for the front. Same 2.5. You just give it that dot. It's just a guideline to where our shoulder slant should stop. So the shoulder line is 5. So now I'm going to measure 5 from the neck guideline to that point. You can see, so from this point here divide by 2, and I'm going to slant it to my shoulder line. So it's a little different here. For the front we came up here 2.5, but for the back here we are just going to come up 1.5 centimeter. 1.5 centimeter, please take note, 1.5 centimeter, and we just connect each point to meet up with each other. However, for the back neck hole, we are going to come down 1.5 centimeter from the top pattern here, from the top line here, and we are just going to just draw out a curve. Unlike the front pattern, we came down 1.5 from the shoulder guideline. So this is a standard neck hole also. And the next thing to do now, I'm going to measure my shoulder to waist. My shoulder to waist is 15. I'm just going to measure 15, and I'm going to draw out my waist guideline, and I'll also draw out my hip guideline too, which is 8. My waist to hip is 8 inches, as you can see. I'm just going to mark that out and draw out my hip guideline. Labeling is always very important, especially if you are a beginner, so you don't mix up the lines. So my waist divided by 4 is 7, and hip is still 9.75. I'm just going to mark all these measurements out, and I'm just going to slant it from the bust, and I'll measure my hip divided by 4 and just curve it out, and also the M. And please take note that all these measurements I'm doing is from the center back, not from the zip allowance. I'm not adding the zip allowance. You can see where my ruler is starting from. It's not starting from the beginning of my pattern, it's starting from that line after the zip allowance, because that's where my block really is starting from. Please take note of that. This is my back pattern, and I'm just labeling it out. The next thing to do now is to draft my waist dart. So I'm going to use a long dart for this. I would be using the same dart measurement, but the way I'm going to draw my dart is going to be quite different, because this one is not going to be an underarm dart, it's going to be a straight dart. So I'm going to measure my shoulder to bust points, and I'm also going to measure my nipple to nipple point. So I'm going to need my nipple to nipple, which is 3.5. I'm going to need the nipple point to know where all my measurements will go. So since it's 3.5 here, I'm going to measure that same 3.5 on the waistline and just mark it, and I'm going to draw out a straight line. But before I do that, I'll also come to the hip line here and mark that 3.5, because I said earlier on it's going to be a straight dart. So I'm just going to join these dots together. This is a straight line now. So on the waistline, that's where my dart is going to be. I'm going to add 1 inch for waist dart allowance. However, 1 inch is not actually a standard. You can choose any amount you want to use for your darts. I'm making use of 1 inch anyways, so I'm going to add 1 inch to the waistline there. I'm just going to mark that 1 inch. I'll come back to it later on. So that 1 inch I'm adding, I'm going to take it out inside the dart. So I'm dividing the 1 by 2, that's 0.5 on both sides. And from the bust point there, I'm going to come down 2 centimeters before I start drawing my dart, because the dart shouldn't get to the bust point. The line should fade before you get to the bust point. So you can see how I'm just making the darts line. So I'm just going to slant it to meet up. So this 1 inch that I draw out here, I'm going to add it at the waist, so that when I take in my dart, I have the same measurement on my waistline. So I'm just lengthening it from the bust there and just adding that line. So the initial seam line there won't be necessary unless I'm making an outfit that does not need that. So I'm just going to cancel this out. Yeah, so basically my waist that is already drawn and I've already added it to the waist. The next thing to do is just to add the sewing allowance, and just the same way I added the sewing allowance for the front pattern, I'm going to do that for the back pattern. So I'm going to add the exact same allowance I added for the front so that I can have the same thing. So I added 1 inch here for the side seam, and for the armhole I added 1 centimeter. Yeah, I just added 1 centimeter. So I'm going to have the same sewing allowance. The same allowance has to go for the front and the back because we are going to sew it the same way. So that's to have the same sewing allowance. So I'm adding half an inch for the shoulder, and I'm also add about 1 inch for the hemming allowance. So you can add as much as what you want for the hemming allowance depending on how you want your hem to look like. Finally, I have my front and back pattern. The difference being the back pattern has the zip allowance and waist, that's why the front pattern has the underarm. That the armhole have a quite a bit of difference also, and when placing it on each other you can see the difference. But take note that your shoulder line must always meet up, they have to meet up. And the underarm dart, when you take it, you can see that the waistline there, it's meeting each other and the length is going to correct themselves. Also, when you want to adjust the neck hole, when you want to change the neck hole, you are going to take your ruler and measure it down the shoulder line. If you want to come down about 2 inches or 1 inch, depending on the type of neck hole you want to give your outfit, you place your ruler this way and you reduce your neck hole to whatever you want to reduce it to. So you take the same thing in front and the back to make sure that your shoulders are equal, and basically that's all. I hope you learned something in this video. If you find the video helpful, give it a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe. And if you have questions, drop in the comment section below. Thank you.